Hi guys, it's Gene here, and welcome back to Perfect Flow. It's been a week now after the Tarawera 50km ultra, which I took out. That was a pretty cool day. A big day for a lot of people, including my guests, Matt Lewisham. He took on the 100-miler over the weekend, so it was cool to hear a little bit about that in today's podcast, as you will see. It's been an easy week for me, feeling good, but some planned time off is in order, so pretty cruisy. And if you missed my race report and musings thereafter, you can find them at beveridge.nz. You'll see the two latest blog posts up there. I do encourage you to read them. I put some effort into them, and I think the feedback has been that there's some good nuggets of information there for people who are looking at improving their own training and want to know what to look for when preparing for these longer races. So my podcast today is with Matt Lewisham. He's a running coach and athlete here in Auckland. He's got a background in personal training, and he's done work for Les Mills and also the New Zealand Defence Force, but now focuses on his own athletes. He also has the bunch of usual certificates that you might expect from a qualified coach, such as nutrition and performance. He's been involved in running for many years now and has some good perspectives and some experience to draw from. In the podcast, we talk about some of our favorite sessions. We find some mutual love for hills. We also talk about technique for running, specifically glutes and hamstrings and their importance, and why you should be using them more when you run, and maybe some tips on how to make that happen. We also talk about training philosophies, the classic periodization, also some other interesting methods like the Moffatone method, and some of my inspiration from Jack Daniels' work. We also talk about pacing and how to train and race at certain paces. Some tips there, I'm sure, for those looking at doing some longer races and shorter races also. We talk about recovery, which is really the true purpose in training from our perspective, his approach to planning training programs, and then we get into a very interesting topic on depression and purpose and his experience with having a short period of depression after some life changes, and how he worked through that and what role running played. And I think there's some good insights in there for anyone looking to improve their mental well-being, which that doesn't mean that you're having serious problems. We should all want to improve our mental state. We can always continue to be happier and less frustrated at all times. So I think there's some good insight there. So we mentioned a few other coaches. Greg Moffatone, he's written a book. There's also Arthur Lydiard, who I'm sure many of you from New Zealand have heard of. I'll get some links to some of his stuff, and also Jack Daniels, one of the all-time great running coaches. Some good nuggets to dig into if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole that many of these guys have dug in their many years of experience. If you like Matt and his perspectives, you can find him at MLPC. That's short for Matt Lewisham Performance Coaching, mlpc.co.nz, and also at Matt Lewisham Performance Coaching on Facebook. So that's all from me, and I hope you enjoy. So Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you. Previously, I've interviewed people who I'm familiar with, people who I know quite well. So I'm definitely taking an entirely new approach this time and talking to someone who I don't know at all. I intend to share a little bit of a little journey with the listeners, and we'll take them through how two coaches might talk about running, and two fairly experienced runners might talk about their training and the things they look for, and hopefully we can share some tips and any other interesting experiences. So The first thing that jumps out at me is you've just done a 100 mile, the Tarawera Ultra 100 mile. It's just about a week after that. So how are you feeling post 100 miles?
Yeah, surprisingly good. I have to admit, I haven't been for a run since. The body's feeling really good. I managed to complete the run with no blisters, so I actually don't have any excuses. And the body's feeling really good. I'm not the fastest runner, so arguably I'm not putting my body under as much strain as the people who are hooning up the hills and scrambling down the hills. But yeah, all in all, very good. I think part of it's a bit of when you just start to look at over the years how many runs you've done. As long as you're a consistent runner and look after your body, it does seem to build quite nicely.
Yep. And how old are you now?
44.
Whoa. Yeah. And how many of these ultras do you have under your belt?
I'm not 100% sure. This is my second 100 miler. I've done a couple of 100Ks. I always like the bigger distances. For me, just the challenge. I wish I enjoyed half marathons and 10K runs. That would be a lot nicer.
Yeah, it's certainly if you're into those things, into the shorter distances, and that's your passion, you get off with a lot less punishment than once you begin to like these longer distances. Having done a few of them, what are the things that you've noticed after these long races?
Oh, good question. You often, I came back from Rotorua on Monday afternoon. By Tuesday I was feeling great, lots of energy, but I knew that's a bit of a false feeling. Your excitement comes back, you've had a wonderful race, but your body needs a bit of time. Muscles are feeling tired and strained, even if they don't feel too tired and strained walking around the house. You've worked them a lot, so it's just nice to ease back in. When I'm coaching people, I'm getting them to enjoy other things they like doing. If they can get into a pool, do some swimming, get on a bike, and just walk, in fact. So keep the body moving, but just make it
so that's
easy.
Just active recovery at its really basics. And it's certainly interesting, having done the 50K at Tarawera and tried to do almost nothing after that. You would expect you'd be most tired the day after the race, and then your fatigue would slowly disappear the more time you have off. But the body seems to like some sort of routine, and different athletes have to look inside themselves and see what kind of routine, or maybe their body does need the time off and they respond quite well to having time off. I've certainly noticed that I was feeling quite good after the race, and now I've had a week of very little training and I feel like crap.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's something to observe there. Is this the longest race you've done?
Yes, it is. Last year took longer. I did Tarawera last year, but in the mud it was an extra 5 hours.
Yeah.
So just time-wise, yep.
Yeah, and have you noticed any differences between the shorter races? So by shorter, like let's keep it marathon as the shorter end, and 100 miles as the longer end. Is there a difference in how you recover from these races, or the feelings in your body the week after an effort like that?
It feels more obvious with the shorter race distances. Training distances, we often do sort of 4 to 7 hour runs, depending what the distance of the race is. And if we're training right and resting right, we might feel a little bit tired, but we can still usually back it up. If it's a race distance, or if you've actually raced it, I do feel the recovery is even more important, and it is needed. I'm trying to think of if I've done marathon distance. Yeah, it's just more acute. It's definitely a recovery day or 2 days, taking it easy, and then easing back into a new training cycle if you're doing that, or if you're lucky enough to have a break, you might be able to enjoy that. With the longer distances, what I mean by it's not as acute, I don't see it as so obvious. You get these funny feelings. So I was the same as you. I felt wonderful Tuesday and Wednesday. The house looked fantastic. I was doing extra things. I was motivated. I was planning out the year. Thursday, I dropped my boys at school and sat on the couch, watched a 2-hour movie, made lunch, fell asleep on the couch watching something I didn't even know what it was. So I felt, just mentally exhausted too. So body really did feel fine. I wasn't testing it by being out there on the road or on the trails. But mentally just gone and forgetting things. So
that's interesting that it affects you mentally as well. And I think that's an important one for keen and motivated athletes to watch out for. And I think I've been there as well, where I was treating the body as a physical system and my mind as a mental system, and not clicking that my decline in mental acuity was a sign of not giving myself enough rest. And taking everything into account to get some idea of your fatigue, I think.
Yeah, that mind-body connection
is really important. And obviously, I mean, it's obvious once you realize the brain is an organ, right? But to actually be paying attention to how your mind feels as an indicator of how much training you're doing is
I find that too
relevant.
I don't know if I remember someone years ago talking about breaking up with the event. So after these big events, especially if it's sort of an A race, coming to terms with the breakup. It's not there anymore. And whether it's you don't have the next goal and how you're going to feel physically and sort of emotionally about life and your purpose, or whether you are looking forward to another A race, or just staying in season, that's worth noting as well, just how that can play out. I've coached one or two cyclists in the past, and they tend to have a lot more races. And I always find that interesting, how to keep them up and focused, especially after they come off a victory or just a great race or two.
You're finding that they feel like that's the pinnacle and they want to recover, or they just kind of lose momentum somehow?
No, they'll start to lose focus and momentum. Desire will still be there, but just trying to keep them engaged and making sure the training is still empowering, I guess, and feeling like it's still working towards the next stage. So that's interesting. And of course, coaching. How do you feel about this idea? I think most of the gains to be made with coaching about that the motivational level, that fundamentally making the athlete more engaged with the program, as opposed to just telling them what to do. It's more being able to pick up the fluctuations in motivation and how to pick them up when the motivation gets lost. I've just had a few athletes where it's obvious that that's the limiting factor. Have you? And the positive factor too. You're so
and the
right.
positive factor. If they're just riding the wave and just smashing it, then coaching is effortless at that stage.
But it's how we make it meaningful, and I think that's right. That's why I sort of meant the opposite too, because if you can get them to connect with the program, understand it. Obviously, we hopefully as coaches have studied and trained and understand more of the mechanics of it. But the thing we unlock is how they are feeling. So this body connection. So if we can help the athletes understand how their body's responding to recovery, to an individual training session, where they're at, and we can leverage that. Because our training's living, especially with a coach, rather than just maybe we've coached people who are just following a program and we contact them maybe once or twice a month. If you can have a bit more contact with them, that's when you really start to unlock it.
I totally agree, and I'm not sure how to fuse those two, because we are living different lives, and often coaching people who are out of town, or even if you're in town in Auckland, that doesn't really matter. It's just not enjoyable to have to travel at basically any time of the day. So I can reflect on how powerful it is, but also on how hard it is to pull off that connection. And I think if there is a local group that you can join in with and get maybe like a regular Saturday session, then I think there's a lot of benefit. That community and that purpose just appears from nowhere, and it's a struggle to try and pull it together with just one-on-one communication. But as soon as you get a group together, so I think you see a lot of coaches now trying to get this group stuff going, and it's so powerful. And I think I attribute my enjoyment for running from that community, that group environment, was the difference between me enjoying the outdoors and wanting to really perform at something, was just that team vibe, that community feel. So
makes it more sustainable. I think you're right too. So otherwise you can have a goal you're trying to chase, and that requires a lot of, if you have a coach or not, independent sort of drive, which can be hard to sustain, 365
Yeah,
every day.
yeah, definitely. So that's the foundation of coaching, as I see it, is how can we keep you motivated,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, the details of what training sessions the athletes need to be doing. What are some of your favorite sessions?
Cool. That's a good question.
What torments do you like to
see,
to give out?
Yeah. So I love the reflection that an athlete can have. So I'm constantly trying to get them to tell me what they've enjoyed about the run. So if
Or what hurts the most, so you can give it again.
yeah, and it's probably hills. As cliched as that is, I love varieties of hill repeats. So whether it's
And is that
newer
specific
running-
for trail running, or are you also giving that?
No,
Yeah.
trail, road,
Yeah.
short, long distance, just when I use it. And I've sort of got a Lydiard trained background, so
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Like that was something that struck me about his emphasis on hills, and I think coaches like Jack Daniels also bring up the improvements in form that you get from doing hills, and not necessarily fast as well.
no, that's
Ju-
right.
just
more
kind
time
of
on the hills is
yeah,
great.
just cruising, which sometimes ends up being a bit of a grind.
yeah,
But just going up the hill itself makes it hard, and you notice some improvement in form because of that.
that's right. Putting that posture under pressure, which I find at sort of the later stages of a hill repeat, I think is really good strength and body conditioning.
And by hill repeat, what kind of duration are we talking?
Anywhere 2 to 4 minutes.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Can be longer depending what people are getting in for, but
Yeah.
and I don't push people to do them quickly because, as you said, more time on the hills. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's great.
Just slow hills is
Yeah, slow
something you
hills
quite
is
like.
good. And mentally, I think people get a gain from that too. Seeing they've got 8 or 10 reps on a training day, that number might seem quite big for people when they're starting out, and they can actually tick those off. They get a sense of achievement as they cruise home.
Yep. Do you have some kind of progression you like to work those hills into?
It all depends on
Throughout
the
a program?
individual, and I start off with shorter hills, and generally, if it's an ultra runner, increasing the volume of them and also the duration.
Yeah.
And then I'll put them into a workout, so they might run for 20 minutes, half an hour first to the hill, and then do the hill repeats, and then they have to run home. I like the fact that it gets them adequately warmed up, but also the having to run home afterwards. The reflection you often get is people are surprised how much energy they still have left at the end of the run after the repeats. Yeah,
and inevitably there's a portion of the session where you're running downhill as well. So it does kind of average out. It's slightly harder and then slightly easier, slightly harder, slightly easier.
And good conditioning, that downhill running, I think
Yeah, and it's a fine line, I think,
Yeah.
the downhill stuff. How do you navigate that?
It will depend on the runner. A runner who's in good shape and good form, at certain times in their training, I will get them to focus more on the downhill running. There'd be one session a week, I'd have them focusing more on the downhill easy up, because now it's more an aerobic effort for them.
Yeah.
And focus on the downhill, the conditioning of joints and knees. If we're lucky to have a technical area, that's quite nice, where they can actually practice the body moving in various ways down a hill.
Yeah. When I was younger, I used to bomb every downhill.
Yeah.
Like it was I just loved it, and I was good at it. So you tend to like things when you're smashing other people.
Yes.
And then came a time when I realized that this might not be so good, actually.
Yeah.
I might not have the right posture and strong enough muscles to support my joints, especially my knees, as I'm bombing these downhills. So then I kind of went possibly too far the other way, where I was super conservative,
That sounds like
very concerned that it was the downhill running that was contributing to the injuries I was working through. And then I'd get to a stage where I would do nothing fast downhill. And sit race day, you have to go fast on race day. And then I would get ridiculous DOMs after that, because I wasn't conditioned enough. So
what was your breakthrough? What changed your
to
to being able to run faster downhill and train?
Oh, yeah, just natural. Absolutely no breakthrough. I wish I could offer advice to people on how to go faster downhill. I don't know. Is it coordination?
I think it's technique and training. So it's the thing. I think the more you practice it, yes, there's a confidence thing to it.
Yeah.
I feel like I had the same path. I wasn't a competitive runner like yourself, but I remember I used to love downhill running, so I'd do the Xterra Trail series, and I'd love running fast through that. And then after a while, I think it was more in the ultras, I'd find I couldn't do that speed without really hurting the knees. I think the first time I did the Kepler, coming down off the mountains.
Oh, right, yeah. That's like an hour of largely downhill, and it's not exactly soft.
No, and 2 hours, I remember I hit the halfway stage, my knees were in agony, so I couldn't enjoy the last 30 Ks. It was a death march. So then I went all conservative, and it wasn't till I got back into my ultras, went up to the 100K at the Blue Mountains, and I was trying
to... That's Australia, Blue Mountains, for people who are not familiar.
That's right. It used to be called the North Face, and then now it's the Ultra Trail. There's at about 70 odd Ks, there's an 8 Ks of downhill section, and I was trying to push for a silver buckle, so I was really trying to push it, and my knees were starting to hurt because of the same old story, the downhills. But someone overtook me, and I couldn't understand how they seemed to be just as fresh as me, but why were they not? Why were they able to keep this pace? And that's when it just really twigged that it was the technique, it was the form, everything we've been coaching ourselves. And I picked up the pace. The pain didn't increase. I'm not saying we should push through pain, but for me, it was surprising. It was like, okay, it's not going to get any worse.
Yeah, might as well go faster.
Let's see how I go. And it didn't get any worse, and afterwards it wasn't any worse. And it was more just that, okay, if we go back to the technique, running's not as, in some ways, left foot, right foot, one step in front of the other. There is actually a little bit of technique and skill to it, which hopefully we're doing when we train. So just remembering all those things really helped.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so just back to the uphill, downhill stuff, which, is really important for conditioning. As I found out, you can be under conditioned, you can be doing a lot of hills, but be under conditioned, and it's a soft tissue conditioning we're talking about here, largely the quads, which need to withstand a really high peak load if you're bombing these downhills. And there's something there that you can actually lose conditioning if you're not just every now and again bombing a downhill. And I think it gives you just that little bit of DOMs, maybe it's the fascia or the muscle, just tones up in some way and is there more resilient on race day. So definitely pull people away from bombing every downhill. But there is some dosage of fast downhills that's quite effective.
And we know we can make up time, so it is a worthwhile place to spend some time in your training. I think, giving it the dosage, giving it the recovery. There's some of the external resistance training we can be doing to running. It can build some of that in.
Yeah, well, let's go there. What kind of resistance training stuff?
So I tend to do just body weight, which is quite useful, and single leg work.
Yes, my favorite.
Yeah, and eccentric. So maybe it's sort of standing on one leg, lowering yourself down on one leg, which is awful, but really does make those knees super strong and supported. I think supported is the word. There's not too much on the knee itself that's changing, but definitely getting the quads and glutes engaged. And I think that's what I love so much about the one-legged stuff, is you can't trick yourself out of not using the right muscles because there's no other leg to push off from. And that was a big revelation to me. Pretty much every runner is going to go through the stage where they have an injury and it involves the knee. They go to the physio says, oh, your glute medius isn't working, your glutes aren't strong enough. Here's some clams, right? And here's some exercise that tries to turn the glutes on. For me, I want to see your experience on this, but I just had no good results from doing like isolated glute activation exercises. I could just get the reps going. I had like weights on my knee and I'm doing this clam for ages. And it wasn't until I just put the whole body on the line and learned to do these one-legged squats. And it's something about integrating that strength into the mechanics, into more appropriate mechanics that made the difference. Because my glutes getting strong doing this clam, but it just made no difference to my form. I think there's probably so I'm not a physio.
Yeah.
I have been a personal trainer, so I have I have appreciation of it. I agree. I think the isolated exercises which target the muscles, I think that's probably a good way for your body to identify them.
Yeah, okay, at least I found a muscle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Electrical connections going somewhere useful.
Exactly right. But I think the integration's important. I think arguably integrating it too soon or without that connection, the larger muscles are going to take over.
Yeah.
So probably the 50 clams you did it ago or every time, they would have helped connect it. I remember years ago I was getting help from an acupuncturist, and my glute after 45 minutes on a run would just start to hurt and it wasn't firing properly. And he had a simple exercise with like a TheraBand just underneath the butt and just walking around, and every so often I do that just to remind myself, I think it just connects all the muscles and gets them firing in order, and that helped.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an athlete trying to work through these kind of problems, trying to see where you're lacking, I think a good place to start looking is what muscles can you get away with on a daily basis without using? What muscles can you neglect without noticing? It's not going to be your quads.
No.
Right. Yeah. You are using them even if you're they're on, like you just can't move properly, but you can lose a lot of these stabilizing muscles. You can live a normal life without using these muscles. So that's a little rule of thumb I think some people can use to figure out which muscles are not going to be working, and you can get away without using your hamstrings as well.
Yes,
it seems. Is that something you've
I've always appreciated the hamstrings and always tried to train them. So I've noticed that arguably if you're not doing as much sort of speed work, you can start to lose connection with the hamstrings, I find. And years ago I started to include more technique training, so especially in my recovery weeks I'll do quite a lot of drills, so just to make sure I am firing them all. So no, I have a lot of love and respect for the hamstrings. I'm always trying to get my body to be fairly balanced. I think that's quite tricky to do because we are quad dominant, we're more anterior developed, so but making sure that back of the legs and then the make sure that kinetic chain's working well. So yeah, I love the hamstrings. Got to use them.
Yeah, you've got to use them. And for anyone who's new to running, there is a bias towards being quad dominant, and you can actually run and still look like you're running without using your hamstrings.
Yeah.
But things you might notice is your heels are not coming up very high. You're not pulling back very far, so you're taking these kind of shorter strides and almost just pushing off as opposed to pulling through.
That's right.
And I think a fantastic drill that I like to do for that is just about that pull through, and it's a visualization about being on a treadmill. I don't know what it's about being on a treadmill, but you're not moving. The treadmill's moving, and you're just pulling back and getting this visualization of pulling the ground as you move at a perfectly constant speed. And you just, like you're on ice, you just keep momentum just because you're just pulling it at the same speed. And something about that activates the hamstrings because you're pulling more than standing and pushing. You've got this pull, and I think the stride increases but not forwards. Your stride increases more backwards because it's not about reaching forward, it's about kind of pulling under.
No, as soon as people reach forward, they tend to heel strike. So that's good if you get them thinking away from that too.
Yeah, of course. I think you need to go through these drills with hands-on, but for anyone who's listening, just on your next run, just notice that. Are you kind of pulling through like you're on a treadmill, or are you just kind of standing and taking each stride as a push, foot by foot?
That's a great distinction, the push and pull of running. You find a lot of people have had calf problems as well. They've started to become more of a pull runner, and I think if you just think about that, the pulling is a lot easier to do than the pushing.
Yeah.
So
it feels effortless. Once you click,
yeah,
you're just holding the speed and you're just trying to be as efficient as possible.
There's the secret there.
It's definitely, I think your like mental objective, whether it's made up or not, whether that's actually what's happening or not, doesn't matter. There seems, once you think about the treadmill or whatever, sliding on
however you
ice,
visualize it. Yeah, that's right.
the technique changes a little bit, and if you can find that works for you, then that helps in the final half of a race. You know, starting to get a bit tired, just struggling, just thinking about that treadmill and just pulling through.
Yeah.
I think is really nice, and definitely how I've kind of got through at least the race last weekend. I was just doing this kind of visualization for the last half and just trying to keep pulling, and you realize that you're not trying to work harder, you're just trying to work more efficiently.
Yeah.
And
And you're coaching yourself through it. That's great.
definitely help. Yeah, a few things to look for. So definitely encourage people to test these things on easy runs and see if they can.
I found you can do it
make
on
a
the
connection.
shorter. I was lucky enough to work with the New Zealand Defence Force, and one of the things we were trying to get people to improve is their 2.4k run, which usually I don't try and help people get fast over that distance, but especially if people are trying to get very tight times, the pulling helps. So the last 400 meters, if they're really concentrating on pulling those feet off the ground, reinforcing that great form and technique, their times were lifting up, and where they'd usually struggle, it gave them sort of an extra gear just to help. So it doesn't always have to be an ultra, though you've got a lot of time to think about technique on the ultras.
Yeah, and combining those kind of last two little topics, hills and form. Have you looked at different techniques for running uphill? Do you let people just work out your own? Do you have any advice on that?
It depends how much training they've done in the past. If they haven't done too much training and they haven't done too much hill work, it's just basically easy hills. And increase the volume and increase the duration. Then we'd work on things like hill springing, high knees, bounding. So there's about 3 or 4 different types of hill running, and then incorporating it with downhills as well in the same workout. So it depends how conditioned their muscles are. You could liken it to doing plyometric type work, which I suppose it is in itself. But the more training background or experience you build up, the more you can do that, and the more beneficial it will become.
Have you looked at walking uphill?
I haven't done as much. I use it myself, and especially with doing 100 miles, and I haven't been able to train as much as I would have when I was younger. I've got a young family, so because I used to run all the hills, and I found I could do that almost as effectively as walking. Nowadays, it's about walking stronger up a hill, and I found if you train that, funnily enough, you get better at it. You're able to hold a good pace, strong legs, the muscles work differently, so there was huge benefit to that as well.
Yeah, I think
you have to train it.
you do have to train it like any different gait. If you're going to do a race as a skip, you need to train that skip.
Don't do it on race day.
Skip might not be your best choice for race day, but on these hillier races, a mix between walking and running is the optimum combination. Once the hill gets steep enough, running requires such a high power output, it's more efficient to walk. So I definitely think people should be training specific to race day, and if that involves walking up some hills, then that's something that I guess gets picked up by a lot of people, but not kind of focused on.
I think it's worth making it explicit. Like
I think doing some walking hill intervals,
not
and
just for coffee. I mean, you're right. Walking hill intervals.
That's right.
Yeah.
So my max heart rate's 193. I've got to 188 walking uphill,
great.
and that's up there, right? That's pretty much that's as high as I can get on the bike once I'm fully going. So it's not an excuse to go slow. It's something that's definitely worth training. And have you ever built like a total elevation into any programs?
That's a good question. No, I've tried to replicate more in longer runs. So if I know I'm entering a race that has 5,000 meters of elevation over 100 k's or 100 miles,
try to get that proportion.
Try to get that proportion right. So when you go for your 2 or 4 hour long run, your body's going through that similar stress of ups and downs. Just to get some conditioning in as well as the time on the feet. Yeah,
that's pretty good. So what other kind of sessions do you like to do yourself? But I'm also really interested in the athletes you coach. What things do you recommend for other people
So I definitely the aerobic running, easy running at the start. I try and get runners enjoying their runs. A little bit of speed work, depending on the runner if they enjoy it, to keep them efficient, but not too taxing.
So that sounds like a base periodization.
Exactly right. Base, exactly right. Building up that base. So I make sure that work's done before we progress to the strength work. I like to spend a lot of time on the hill or variation of strength type work on hills. Then it's about if it needs to be aerobic conditioning, anaerobic conditioning, and that sort of sharpening, bringing it all together, race specific type work. If I've got the luxury of having sort of a 4-week block before we need to taper, starting to really fine tune what it's like to be in the race environment, whether it's terrain, whether it's pacing, those type of things. So making the training almost sport specific. I mean, that is sport specific, but
yeah. So has Lydiard's style of stuff incorporated race day specific stuff as a big as an emphasis? I guess whenever I'm looking at his body of work, I'm more interested in the periodization. I can't recall actually noticing whether he has a big emphasis on doing sessions at the exact race speed.
I've been trained in it. I wouldn't espouse to be an expert on it. But I do think that the work on figuring out what your pacing is for an intensity for all your training sessions is factoring what it would be like on race day. So getting that whole body conditioned to running at, say, 7/8 or 3/4 of race pace.
Yep. And knowing what that effort feels like. Yeah, the way I describe that is our body is creating a link between the effort we feel in our mind, or the effort we can observe with our breathing, or maybe it's heart rate that you're using. It's creating a link between those kind of inputs and the output, which is the speed you're going.
Yeah.
And getting a feel for that is key. And every time you're doing a different intensity session, I think just taking note of that helps you know what pace you need to be going.
And it sounds like you did that very well with the 50k. Like really understanding what you could be pushing. And
so that's been my hobby horse for a few years.
Very cool.
And it works for me because my heart rate seems to be very predictive of my pace. My girlfriend, for example, no way. Like there's plus or minus 5, so a range of about 10 beats per minute on any given day. And this could be in the morning before breakfast, so that's not been affected by caffeine. This is affected by just lifestyle, other unavoidable lifestyle things. And so for those sessions, heart rate's no longer a good predictor. So it works for me. But some other people, I think you need to look at how much you can talk. Like, are you gasping between words? Then maybe use that as an example, or your breath rate. Like, are you how long between breaths? There's some things there to use. I get a lot of inspiration from Jack Daniel's work, where he tried to create more of a predictive link between heart rate and the pace that you should be running. All his stuff is on the track, so that's all good. That's all nice for some sessions. But I think that's a good starting point for people to get from. There is a link there, and you can work out some sort of predictor for your body.
Especially in those races where the time is important. Some people just want to complete events.
That's right.
Experience the adventure.
What's the purpose?
But if you're chasing a time goal, you do need to put some thinking and time behind it. Planning, practicing too. I noticed there's. I've just noticed a few coaching models over the years have, and I think for safety as well, a lot of training at sort of aerobic level and some very high intensity. A lot seem to steer clear of training at race pace. So I don't know whether it's. I always wonder.
What kind of race pace are they like? Which kind of races are they suggesting to steer clear of?
I'd say it's probably majority of races, so anything from sort of I imagine 10k upwards. And steering, it's weird when you talk about an ultra marathon. Race pace can obviously be, it could be 5-minute Ks, it could be 7-minute Ks, which that can be comfortable for most people to do for quite a long time. But we were seeing, this is going to sort of sports performance and sports injury conferences, just finding a lot of injuries are happening at sort of that 80% heart rate, between 80 and 90, that sort of place where a lot of people are comfortable to feel like they're working. So I often find trying to coach people to enjoy the slower running and have a purpose around that, and then almost the treats or rewards of the higher intensity.
The treats.
Yeah. Now you deserve an injury, or there are intervals. I shouldn't say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that where the word junk miles comes from?
That's a good point. I don't know. I think
because
a lot of
my understanding of junk miles has changed a lot.
Right. Tell me what you think, junk miles. Yeah.
Well, it used to be, because I was a highly motivated, relatively ignorant in the sense of not realizing what I'm playing with here, like, and how easily one can break.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, super keen, just went hard every session.
Yeah, right.
Had to be a beast session.
Yeah. Quality, and quantity.
Yeah. That was the kind of illusion, is quality is key. And I was doing shorter races then, like maximum 80 minutes.
Yeah, right.
So there is a bigger emphasis on the higher intensity than now that I'm doing some ultra stuff. But the illusion that quality is higher intensity, I think some people, perhaps there was a bit of overcompensation with coaches like 20 years ago, when maybe just every marathon runner was just doing jogs. I don't quite know. It's just some ideas. And then perhaps there was a bit of overcompensation where the coaches are saying, oh, you need to do quality, kind of up the intensity.
Yeah.
And there seems to be an overshoot, because every new athlete that I kind of talk to is pushing hard all the time. And like every session is trained to fatigue. Yeah. Right. They get to the door, they're like, oh yeah, I was just slowing down just as they finished. And to realize that quality is more about precision than about higher intensity. And I think Jack Daniels goes into this quite a lot. He's trying to get you to train at the lowest possible intensity to get the maximum possible benefit.
Yeah, doesn't it make sense?
Yeah, so if this is the intensity or the range of intensities where you're getting a significant benefit for your lactate threshold, then you need to just go up to that, no more, because if you're training more, you're still training the lactate threshold. So you might as well be the lowest possible intensity to get the benefit, and kind of for the shortest possible time as well. Like, don't spend too much time at that intensity. These are dangerous intensities to be training at too much. So you shouldn't be scared going there, but it shouldn't be every session. And same with intervals, even higher intensity. Just you use sparingly until you've built up that injury resistance, that maybe you can use it more. But definitely, I exploded as a young runner. Just got faster really quickly, and then just exploded. I basically spent 2 years becoming really good from nowhere, and then 2 years kind of wasting away. And so I spent 4 years kind of not really getting, overall after 4 years of running, I kind of hadn't really got anywhere, because I was just working with the wrong paradigm.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, get that plateauing, don't they? And they put it down to, maybe that's all my body can give me, or it's often worth looking at other approaches, or talking to other people about your approach and how it is working. The big thing, and this came from being a personal trainer, was the whole understanding of recovery. And it's probably obvious to most people. To me, it wasn't too obvious at the time, but the exercise, the training, the workout, that's not making you stronger. It's how you recover. That's breaking your body down, and it's when you then get to recover from that stress, that's when the body gets stronger, more conditioned. And so you're right, you push yourself to a certain point, then stop the training, and make sure you then get the recovery to really benefit from the workout. That's when you're getting the...
That's right. We're actually not trying to train hard, we're trying to recover hard.
Yeah.
So again, it's flipping it on its head. It's not that outrageous once you've spent any time looking at the human body. Like, it's obvious that's the way it has to be, but I think when we're working in the social setting of training, the default is that harder training is always more gains. And it's mostly true until it's not true. And I think that's where a lot of people come unstuck, and certainly been there. How do you manage recovery in in your trainings, are you doing the build, recover, build, recover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to have 2 weeks of build and then a recovery week.
Just two. Okay.
Just two. Yeah.
Short.
I've had
3
a look
week
at 3.
mesocycle.
For me, it's not so. Yeah.
And is that for you personally,
Yeah,
or
me
for
personally.
your?
It depends
what
on
do
the
you do for the
individual.
athletes? as
So
well, yeah?
I've trained. I remember one lady I coached for Ironman. She said, "I'll do 6 weeks high or 6 weeks build,
Yeah.
and then I need 1 whole week off." I was like, "Okay." So we just worked for her. They weren't all 10% builds.
Yeah.
So we played with how things were developing. Other people work quite well with a 2 and a 1. Other people 3 and a 1, depending. 2 and a 1 I use to sneakily get more technique in. So I use the recovery weeks, to give people a mental break and a physical break, but to work on their technique, get them doing drills which they wouldn't let me do in a build week.
So the sessions that they're doing are very different between those two types of weeks. So it's quite often, and I think if I do a build, recover, then I kind of just make it like the previous one, but 60%.
Yeah.
Everything's 60%.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
shorter. I mean,
Yes,
shorter.
yeah,
like
volume
10
down.
intensity.
Yeah.
Yeah, just volume down. But I think that's a great opportunity to get them focused on something that feels like they're improving something that they're not really good at.
Yeah, that's right. That's the
And so their
yeah.
mind is satisfied, right? Like
Yes.
these motivated people want to feel like they're grasping something.
Yeah.
And I think if they can grasp something that's not actually making them as tired, then
That's
win-win.
it. Yeah, they come to the next block even more engaged. Because I mean, and you may have come across, there's a lot of A-type personalities in our sport, and I remember comments like, "I'm not lacing my shoes up for less than 35 minutes." It was like,
Go hard or go home.
Yeah, it's like, I love that intensity. We'll use it at the right time, but obviously not always in training.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to keep those type of people engaged and feel like they're achieving and developing even in their training.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the approach that I moved to with the building recovery into the blocks after years of doing either a 4 or a 5 week mesocycle.
Right.
And this is the idea of doing an even shorter one. I'm not sure why I didn't really investigate that quite so much, but 3 weeks consecutively of the required increase in volume
Yeah.
was actually too much. It was the 3 weeks build that I couldn't
Yeah, I agree.
I couldn't handle.
I'm the same.
So I kind of discarded that. I said it's not working for me. There are plenty of people who have better injury resistance, maybe there's better biomechanics, and they don't get broken so easily.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had this 4th week to recover was irrelevant because I was breaking on week 3.
Yeah, so good.
Right. So if some people are struggling with that 3 week build and then recover on the 4th week like I was, and maybe a 1-2 and then recover.
Yeah, they can do a 1-2,
It's a
or you
different
could
way.
even try 1 and 2 are the same, exactly the same training. And some people respond well to that because it's a familiar session the next week, and as long as you're building recovery into that first week, so they're getting some, they should do that next session better. Their body will move better, they will feel better at the end. And then the 3rd week can be a lift in volume and distance, duration, that type of thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, just different ways to play with it. And we're all a case study of one, aren't we? So yeah, you figure it out with like, I'd love to be doing more 3. And I remember when I was planning for this recent run, I wanted a few 3-week blocks, but I could fit those more in for the easy aerobic as long as I wasn't trying to lift distance too much. But when I was starting to push the strength work, I dropped straight back to doing 2 quality strength sessions a week, getting the recovery in. It gave me a chance to also work more on my efficiency rather than becoming just strong.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's right. And you mentioned the old 10% rule
yeah,
earlier as well.
Yeah.
The rule that no one
quite high.
uses.
Yeah, that's right.
But
yeah,
it's kind of a ballpark for a newer runner, I think, who's lived an active life.
Yeah.
And they're not starting from physical rock bottom, but running wise, they're close to rock bottom. They can probably get some 10% increases early on. But if you're looking at someone who's done a fair amount of running, if I added 10% to one of my weeks, like into a solid week, like it's an overload week straight away. This week, it's looking beastie. So that just for anyone who's new, that is not the rule to be following. Unless maybe if it's just 2 up and 2 and then down. What I ended up doing is just cranking that right back. So I've kind of got this smoother kind of curve where I'm improving really
That's nice.
slowly.
Yeah.
And the first 5 weeks of the block feel so easy because
Yeah.
I'm just doing like 5% increase or something per week, and the percentage increase is getting smaller,
Yeah, okay.
but it creates this interesting curve where although the percentage increase is slowly getting smaller throughout the block, the absolute increase gets bigger in the middle of the block
Yeah, right.
because you're getting a smaller percentage but of a higher previous week. So it kind of adds on, you're always adding on to the previous week with this percentage, but then it kind of forms an asymptote towards this ideal week, and you've got to this, like for me it's like a 13-hour week that I've got there without really ever stepping it up.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the theory, the first principles behind it are that you should be able to form some equilibrium between the amount of load that you're putting on your body and the amount of recovery. And my explanation for why the load recover failed is because the load was so high, and at the end of the 4th week it sums, but I crossed some threshold in that 3rd week where my body breaks, so I needed to pull it down. And then that recovery, because I'm not exerting myself so hard, that recovery in the 4th week is kind of redundant, because I could actually handle physically, I could recover from the 3 builds once you kind of truncate that 3rd week. So let's just smooth the whole thing out and get this like perfect balance. And it's kind of like I'm guiding this missile like the whole time, like slightly tweaking. I need to go down a little bit and trying to keep this like perfect balance the whole time. And I don't really know. There isn't any. It's not scientific in terms of evidence for it. In terms of evidence for it, I know no one is studying this, and I don't necessarily think it's practical to study it, because it just, like, the noise of individualization just cancels everything out.
But I think it's a really good...
It's worth something. People should try this, I think. And they should try the really short one, like you've got, the 2-2, 1-2, recover, 1-2, recover. Then they should try 5 and then, try the smoother approach as well, where you're just slowly increasing, and every week feels a little bit below what you can achieve. Until suddenly, towards the end of the block, you're doing these big weeks. And wow, how did I get here? Like, when was the hard week?
It might be a duration or a volume build, or it might just be an intensity build. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, probably this is more people getting into running, looking backwards. It's like they're doing a marathon for the first time, or they want to try to build and they're always trying to build up to getting these big Ks.
That's right. So how do you go about setting a program for somebody they've come to you, hey, I'm an athlete, this is how fast I can currently run, and this is how fast I want to do the race. What do you do with those 2 bits of information?
I try and encourage them not to have a set in stone training document that we produce on day one.
Well, that's also true.
I give them the overview of where we're going to give the confidence. And I think this is where ultras help, because you can't... So people running a marathon might say, okay, I need to get up to 42 Ks. I know I can sort of do a 2.5 to 3 hour run by the end of it, and that's going to get me the right point. Knowing I'm going to be running out for 24, 30 hours, you don't go, okay, I need to be able to run for 18 hours. So it's so
obvious with ultra. It's a little bit more tempting with marathon training, where people are going to do a 4-hour marathon perhaps, and they say, do I need to do a 4-hour training run?
That's right, cool. And it'll give me the confidence.
It's almost possible, but with ultra it's obviously out. It's obviously just ridiculous.
That's right.
Do a training run like that.
So that's where I come back to principles, and I would spend, depending on their conditioning, the first part, maybe it's like when I trained for my first 100 mile, it was the first half of my training was just getting me to be a better, more efficient runner. So that was aerobically. I didn't focus on strength until the last half of my training. It was all about technique. So I did a little bit of speed just to make sure that my legs were turning over, but the majority of it was just easy runs, enjoying it, building up that run recover cycle, so I could recover better from cycles, and I would build the weeks would build on themselves at the right time because of that. So it was all just about becoming a more comfortable runner. Wasn't worried about speed, and then I'd spend the last half. What I really realized then, aerobically, I was going to be comfortable for the entire race. But the muscles were going to take it. Were not going to be able to get me through it. So that's where I spent 8 weeks of strength training, trying to improve speed. I still look at getting the engine big, so that aerobic conditioning at the
Aerobic
start.
base.
Yeah, I love that. It works well for me. I know everyone's looking. I mean, people outside pure running, I think, are all high intensity interval training. We know there's a benefit to that
the
stuff.
hype for the hype.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean,
kind of seems to be on the tail end of
which is
waiting
nice.
for the next. Yeah,
yeah, what's going to be
what's
next?
going to be the next hype? Yeah.
So I still believe in the endurance, and I've seen a lot of athletes perform incredibly well just focusing on aerobic, which is cool. And I've experienced it myself. And when I've gone over like say 12-hour weeks, that's when I've started to see some magic happening. That was the first thing that clicked me onto the Lydiard style of training, because he's sort of famous for these 160k weeks, all of these big mileages, and I was never sure. I was always trying to look for a smarter way to train, but I have found as long as you're allowing your body to run and recover, when you're starting to get into these bigger distances accumulated in a week, when your body's handling it, something magical does happen. Now, that's not every week you're doing it. You build up to these weeks.
Yeah.
But that certainly helps, and having the big engine. My fastest ever, or the only time I've ever won a race, was the year that I trained for a competitive 100k. So that wasn't the race I won, but when I stepped down to a 45k, this aerobic engine was just so much bigger, and I could flow over the hills more and up the mountains, and that realization was like, okay, not that you're doing over distance for every race, but just isn't that nice? You know, you've done a big race, actually get some smaller races in, and hopefully you can enjoy those.
That gives you a really good proof of concept. Have you looked into any of the work put out by I think it's American Moffatone? He wrote the book
Zone 2 training,
159, kind of arguing that you could do a 159 marathon on his method. And I think he has these very optimistic calculations, taking it to like 153 or 156 or something in his book. Like,
wow,
you know, really pushing the envelope on, I think, exceeding where anecdotes kind of, he's definitely pushing something too far. But it is this zone 2 training, just like lots of easy and building this huge base. And just keep building this base and building and building.
I get the concept, and bigger engine,
I had a look and was like, okay, this is just way too optimistic. If this was as possible as he claims, people would be doing it. They don't seem to be doing it. But I think it's really good to just expose yourself to the value of building volume in that easier zone.
I agree.
And building that the whole way through until you need to up the intensity so much that you need to pull the volume back. But it's clear anecdotally on myself that there is something magic about the volume, and you'll hear many coaches say that like your performance today is the accumulation of every mile for the past 10 years. Right. It just sticks with you to a small degree each session you do.
I think it's a good way to reassure people, especially coming into races who are new to that distance or new to that event or just new to running, that it's not the 2 sessions they missed because work stopped them, or that they start to get a bit injured or got a cold. It's look back at the 16 weeks, hopefully longer, 24 weeks, all those runs, 40, 50 runs you've done, hours of training. That's what's got you to this point, and that's what you're going to be using on race day.
And maybe you missed the cherry on top. But like the cake is
still got cake.
Totally. I just wanted to move more towards kind of purpose in training and how you feel that builds into a lifestyle.
Right.
How have you worked training into your life? There's lots of things going on.
Point.
And how do other people balance these priorities? Like, what is, at the end of the day, what is their profession, and at the end of the day, what is their sport? Well, what does it mean to them, and how do we value these two things? So I kind of know where my values are at. How do I communicate that in a way that makes sense to other people is still mysterious.
I think it is so individual. What we tend to find, especially a lot of competitive runners, are very goal focused. So that helps. And that's a lot more, I think, easier. Really, it's trying to... So as soon as you've got a goal, I think that helps. You can wrap you'll unpick the purpose and you can wrap their mission and training into
Yeah.
that. How do you sustain it? It all depends on the people. Some people get a bug for, I always think of trail running, but say trail running, they'll see exciting events. There's more and more every weekend. So they'll want to do, say, 300 or 400s in a year, and they'll probably have a limit to how many they can actually do and do well. Some people, or maybe it's a half marathon or a marathon bug, they'll just start to do more and more. And as a coach, sometimes we have to be the safety officer on that and try and pull them back, even though they're starting to wrap their identity around these races and the good feeling they have. Try and maybe get them to take a rest from one or choose a shorter distance. So that's, I think, a challenge for coaches. The purpose, for me, I need a purpose to keep me training. When I look back over my years, even from some school days up until 44, I've always been involved in some kind of activity. So whether it's been martial arts training, whether it's been running, but I found I need to have either whether it's the running group, like you say, or whether it's a training group you train with. So whether it's the social stuff that's pulling you in every week, and it's a catch up and I'm learning a skill, for example. That was the martial arts side of things. For running, it was the adventure. Initially, it was, I'm going to go and run in the mountains, and I'd see the poster and that would draw me in and keep me engaged. And that would mean I would regularly train. I didn't have to battle with myself. It was like, I've got 4 runs to do this week, I'm going to get out and do them. Later on in life, it was trying to stay fit and healthy, keep up with the kids, and then how do I marry that with work, no sleep, those type of things. So I think understanding how important things are. Everyone talks about the why at the moment. I shouldn't sound dismissive. I absolutely believe in it. I just think it feels a bit, that's everyone's thing. But you need to, and there's often a few whys. Why you're doing the run, why it's important to you, why you're going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to run with a head torch around the parks, when actually some sleep would be nice. So everyone's individual. And I think the more people you meet, the more individual you realize we are. There's themes of it's a goal and it's important, but I do find the identity thing with us, and the more we do it, either the better we become at it or just the more we do it, taking it away from people can be really tough.
Yeah,
So
that's right. That's where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it seems to be, I don't know if it's less of a problem with older people, but it's definitely with younger people. And I felt this as well when I struggled with injuries, because I built my identity around the running.
Yeah.
And I had become really emotionally attached to my future successes, as if I had them guaranteed, right? And I've seen this happen with a few people, and it's not pretty once. And there's a high chance that you will get injured and have to take a season off.
Yeah.
Or this could be it, right? Like you could hurt yourself to a degree. That means that running is no longer the sport you should be doing. You should be on the bike now. You've seriously hurt yourself. And yeah, I think we all know where that leads. And you might have had some experience in that area of negativity.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned you had some mental health problems at some stage.
Yeah.
Was running something that helped you then, or was just talk me through that as kind of holistically as you can, because there is always a different trigger for everyone.
I got depression when we had our second child, which is bizarre because it was a very happy moment.
Yeah.
I think I lost a bit of purpose because I'd been stay-at-home dad and my wife was now home and she was doing an amazing job of being a mum and had more time with the kids. But so I found running, but it was more just exercise, being active, helped me cope through that stage. And I explored mindfulness a bit more, so understanding a bit more of how meditation and mindfulness, just understanding that could help. Then I found, in that slightly better frame of mind, I was still suffering from the depression for about 6 months. The Tarawera Ultra came along, and that I'd loved that area. We'd had family holidays.
How much running had you done kind of before this, before your kids and stuff?
Hadn't run an ultra 100k, something like that, for about 5 years.
Okay.
I'd ticked over running. I'd had a run club. I'd run a marathon the previous year. So for me, I'd say, I hadn't been running, but I'd been socially running, helping others run. But I'd let it go. And that gave me a sense of purpose again. So for me, this was the goal. It was a bit more straightforward and black and white, but that goal changed my mindset again. It was like, I've got something to live for. Is a bit over the top, but
well, for some people it's not.
Yeah, no, you're right, it is. But that's the tricky part. If you put too much into it, well, what happens if I get injured? So, and I had attempted a 100-miler many years before. It was a road one, and had stopped at 114. So I had that chipping away at me too, going, oh, okay, you might not be able to do this. So I was cautious about making it the be-all and end-all. So I really did focus on just in that enjoyment aspect. When I said just becoming a more enjoyable, efficient runner, very quickly I felt the benefit of that. I was able to run again comfortably, go out for an hour and feel great afterwards, not feel exhausted. All of that type of thing started to lift my mental mood as well. And then the mindfulness, just the understanding how we overthink things and how busy the mind is, helped when it actually came to the 100-mile event, just starting to realise that when you're in the grind, you're still in a beautiful part of New Zealand. Just look around. Yes, there's a bit of pain. Okay, acknowledge that. What about the trees and the rivers?
Yeah, I think I like to say you are what you are paying attention to.
Yeah.
And it's some people have a bad race, or they have an injury and the physio's told them to take 3 weeks off, and they just spend days focusing on the difference between their expectation and what reality is presented them. And that's their reality while they're focusing on that. Yeah. And I remember like calling my coach, like just being pissed off in the car because I'd like pulled another muscle and just being like, this is all shit. Like this is so unfair. Like what's going on? And it just feels like a totally different person now. I don't know how I was so focused on the necessity to be the best, or just the necessity to do the training I felt like I should have been able to do. And now I feel more that just I enjoy every session for what it is, and I just spare a little moment to be grateful that every time I've managed to run, whether it's just a 30-minute jog or hours in the hills. I think that changes the focus from performance, which a lot of people don't want to give up the idea that they want to perform well, and therefore they think that they will perform better if they focus more on performing well. Whereas I argue that's not the case. No. You perform as well as you're going to perform based on the training you've done, and you should actually just focus on enjoying the process of the training.
Of talking about this, and that's a great way, whether it's training for an event or just life,
I've definitely lived like a pretty full-on time up until I stopped working full-time 6 months ago, and that was the first time that I was like, I get what people like you were talking about now. What on earth am I doing?
You got that space.
There's just so much space in my life and so little pressure, and I just like ground to a halt in a month. And I started feeling, I was like, oh, I don't feel so good. I'm just feeling like very lethargic and starting to feel a little bit like this is bleak. Like what's going on? I was like, I kind of, this is it. And because I've talked to people with depression, I kind of see how I almost like saw the door and didn't go through it in a way. I was like, right, this is how we have to go the other way. I need a little bit more pressure. I need to focus on the things that are worth paying attention to, not just allowing yourself to kind of meander into this very, very strange space of that feels hopeless and purposeless. So yeah. And how did you pull out from that in the end? You started running. That's good. I mean, physiologically as well.
Exactly.
The hormone management is good. There's more endorphin, serotonin's been regulated better. But from a mental perspective, like for some people, they really struggle. There are connections in their brain that have really tied them into this way of thinking. Did you find stuck, or once your lifestyle changed, your thought patterns went back to the way they used to be?
I think there was, it was, for me, it was the sense of purpose, and I think I've always known that. So having something to be purposeful about. So initially it was a really big, obvious thing, and one of these scary goals, big, hairy, audacious goal. That was the 100-miler. So I put that in front of me.
Right, and you didn't feel like a sense of overwhelming anxiety from the monumental size. You just felt like, well, that's good. Different people.
Exactly.
Some people might
So
just be
for
so
me,
terrified.
It's that sort of dare to be great thing. And usually if I was being rational, it's like, you've got no experience at running 100 miles. I mean, I have now, but it was going to be something that could stop me, would be well beyond me. And most people think it's crazy, but that was just exciting. And then I knew if I put a plan together around it, I could get there. So getting out of it was giving myself that obvious goal, and then I've just work on the more my wife returned to work, and then it was like, okay, I've got my job back again, the looking after the children, making sure the house is
Purpose.
and the family. So that gave me purpose again. And what I've realized recently is just literally end of each day, these are all these good practices we like to have. So the one I'm working on at the moment is making sure I've got a mission for the next day. And it can just be to make sure everyone's going to have fun in the house, or whether it's going to be, okay, I need to get on top of finances, bills, I need to
some objective that gives you this little hint of focus.
That's right. And then
spark.
I'll have a major, so it might be work day or something like that, or get into the office day is the big focus, and then maybe 3 things underneath it which I'll try and tick off, and that's usually achievable. So you finish the day on a bit of a high.
Well, that's also the case.
Yeah.
Some people trying to take on too much, and then they realize that they're always underachieving, and then they pay attention to their underachieving, and it's all just the way they present their behaviors to themselves. Yeah. And that can be, I mean, it's hard to see when you're kind of ingrained in a certain routine, but just having that daily routine, I think, is getting the daily routine
and manageable.
Right for you is really important. So some sense of purpose and contribution and progress. Yeah. But not so much to do that you're lying in bed thinking,
oh, that's right, yeah, exactly.
Oh, I just didn't do anything compared to what I hoped to have achieved. And I think I've now realized how hard that is now that I'm not working. It hasn't been as easy because I am the master of my own time. Yeah. And it's harder to balance. Whereas before I was just running on a treadmill that I enjoyed, but the treadmill was telling me what was coming up next, right? You just jump over the obstacles as they come, and it was fun, but I hadn't quite trained that ability to set yourself the right amount to do.
That freedom is exciting when it's working, but otherwise it can be quite sort of barren. Too many options. You don't know where you're spending your time and purpose. Yeah, I think the thing too, the big purpose and the little purpose. I mean, if I just put everything into the 100-miler, there's the worry that if I'd got injured, or that could have unhinged me again, I guess. So, and something I've seen success in working when I used to work in a corporate, and also now working with athletes, just putting your training together, building on little successes, have these small things that you celebrate along the way, that builds on creates a momentum and builds on itself, rather than having these big chunks that could equally fail and have a huge impact. You're in a better space when you do have a hiccup, if you've had all these small builds along the way. You know, your bounce back is better.
That's right. And maybe part of why that also feels good is we do tend to be there's lots of things in our near vicinity that we are making progress with. And if you're paying attention to the things that are close, like maybe it's just a new strength and conditioning exercise you're doing, or just a new session, or maybe you're training in a new area and you can measure your improvement on a certain loop or something. There's always something to be, some sort of progress to be celebrated. Right. And I think when you zoom out more and you realize the inevitable is that you're getting older, and the last time I ran a fast 5K was 6 years ago. And it's suddenly there's these opportunities to be a little more negative about what's going on.
Yeah, if you're a certain type, exactly right. Some people they'll see a decline in speed, and that's the negative thing. But if you change what you're looking at, I can't paraphrase actually as well as I hope to. But look at those other things where you are gaining. I look back and I've noticed my training runs, it's harder to keep that same aerobic pace that I used to have. but I feel I'm improving in other things. So that's cool. Yeah, you do have
what
to...
you're paying attention to.
Yeah, pay attention, exactly.
Yeah. And another one that I think a lot of trail runners have such a good opportunity to benefit from is that sense of exploration that you mentioned that was a motivator for you as well.
Yeah.
For me, it was the root cause of everything, is this desire to explore somewhere new.
Great.
Do you encourage people to tap into that, or is that still kind of a byproduct of the training as opposed to an objective? This is new. I don't see anyone
I know what you mean.
really going this way.
I think it's
with training. But
I think it's
an idea.
more that should become your story, and the more you talk about your own running experience, weave that in, and that can sort of switch that light on for people if they haven't already got it. So I work with people who love the trails and the adventure, and they want to try new places. They want to go overseas. They want to travel with it, or see somewhere they'll never repeat a run, and that's cool.
Yeah. And if they can bring that into a weekly routine, like, where am I going to run on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Where are the options? And you spend all day looking on the map to find a new place to run, or even better, just start running.
That's right.
Where do you go?
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to know Ks. Just go out for an hour. When you get to half an hour, so you've explored somewhere, come back to home.
Try to pull off a ballsy loop.
Yeah.
And you'll fail half the time, right? And you end up running 90 minutes instead of 60. But there's that sense of exploration that brings a lot of enjoyment. It's just this feeling of being in the moment, and you're more vigilant when you're exploring somewhere new, especially on the trails. There's kind of the sense of, I don't exactly know where I am. There's something there that brings a lot of focus and a lot of satisfaction as well. At least for me, I'm not overly terrified of being lost. Like, I feel like if I have to spend the night somewhere, hopefully I'll get through. But there is something to be said about putting a human somewhere against nature and just seeing the light switch on and this engagement. They pay more attention to where they're going, and there's something there. It's worth exploring more.
And I think that's more your trail runners will be more attuned to that.
Yeah, why have they been drawn to these adventurous races? There's something there. There's a calling that I think's part of why the movement's growing at a bigger rate than
and I feel more confident talking
sports.
that way to people too when they say, why do you do these runs? It's like, for the adventure, and they tend to get that a bit more so than what seems to be just a ludicrous distance. It was like, for the adventure, and then you tell them, you weave your story about the mountains you run over, or lakes and rivers you run through, and they can sort of start to get that. And for me, it's a safe place to get an adventure. I'm not going to be able to join the Foreign Legion next year and have a boys' own adventure like that, but this is a safe adventure I can have on my doorstep, and I don't have to go out of the country to have it, because we've got some beautiful places around us. So we live in a great country. Like, we have to be grateful
of absolutely spoiled. Definitely changes the perspective for me of kind of why in the past I've been so keen to travel overseas.
Right.
And it's so much here.
Yeah.
We're so lucky. And I just wanted to go back to depression a little bit, and what other things helped you?
The mindfulness thing was big.
Recover. So you did look into mindfulness. Were you following a particular style of meditation, or were you just doing it yourself, or how did you approach that? I guess I want to. It's not necessarily relevant for running.
Oh yeah.
But it can. Some people find it really useful, but it's just useful for so many things and for so many people. And I just know there's a lot of people who need to hear this right now, I think. So, there's a fair amount of disillusion around, and I think it's a good tool. So I just want to talk about it a little bit more.
No, that's cool. And I'd tapped into it. When I look back, I first came across it in martial arts. I had a wonderful teacher when I was in my early 20s who encouraged us to do it in class, meditation and quietening the mind. And it's finding the style or the type that resonates with you, because it's very hard to turn your mind off. And so I played with it. I've done yoga classes and been taught by yoga teachers and helped to breathe and still the mind and all of those type of things. Nothing really worked until I did. And I've read a lot of, I have a philosophy degree of all things. So I've always been intrigued in how we think, and I thought that was a real skill. This is what separates us from the animals, our ability to think. Now I realize just how much trouble it causes us. So
Yep.
actually, if I can quiet my mind, be more myself, be me, and then choose when I think and what thoughts I pay attention or give attention to. So when I was going through my depression, there was, and these courses are happening all around the country, I know, there was a 4-week, 1 hour a week course at the Peace Centre, I think it was, in Emily Place in Auckland. So I went along there. Being there and being present at a place where you're being talked to was easier than reading a book or listening to an app. So I learnt some skills there, and it was just, the thing I liked about it was, and being a runner, it was a physical thing. So it was bringing it back to the physical. So as soon as you start to think too much, you just do a bit of a body scan, and you're just literally thinking about your body, but that gives you a little focus. And I kept that going. We had an app, we were given wildflowers, and I followed that. So I do the lessons and the little practices. They wouldn't even more than sort of 10 minutes at that stage. And I'd start to really enjoy the space it gave me. It was like a mental holiday. I remember sitting in the house, having my 10 minutes, just doing a body scan. But afterwards, just everything felt a lot clearer in my head. And then, but it was that appreciation of the moment, which I really clicked into. It was like, oh, you've just had a mini holiday.
And well, why not more? Why
not more? Exactly.
Why don't I give myself a break more of the day? Yeah. So I think there's some speculation about the whole enterprise. Why are we going away to focus on something if we still have to return to our hectic lives?
Yeah, right.
The key is you have to bring some insight back. You have to have a greater awareness of how to snap yourself out of your own suffering.
Yes.
So for you, I think I saw there that the answer to that question, you did manage to bring things back with you that did affect the way you think in your daily routine.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just the 20 minutes you spend giving your brain a little break.
Yeah.
And whether people are doing that through guided meditation or just increasing their awareness, and I feel like in any learning someone does on how the brain works, you begin to realize that maybe these feelings that I identify with, I don't have to feel so strongly attached to them. And you don't necessarily even need meditation, but the insight makes it just so obvious that you don't have to experience these negative emotions all the time. And I think just people integrating that into their lifestyle, where they're just sitting on the train and there's, okay, let's just listen for a little bit. Or whether someone just does something that annoys them and then they realized that annoyment doesn't have to be what they're paying attention to.
Define you.
And as soon as you pay attention to, you just ignore them, pay attention to something else. The annoyance like lasts all of a few seconds and it's gone. So you don't necessarily need to use meditation, but I think the insight you get from doing it is just like, it's just so obvious.
And the mindfulness programs seem to focus on those. You touched on a few little lessons there, which is superb. You know, someone annoys you and your reaction to it. I found the mindfulness program was nice and straightforward and simple. I was never trying to solve the whole problems of how I thought or all of this. It was just becoming aware of the impact these thoughts would have, and learning that, okay, someone does something to me. It's like, okay, do I want to deal with this now? If I don't, it's like, okay, just park it and carry on, think about something else,
or ruminate on
it. Like, don't just spend all that time going over and over about it. You either deal with it, or if it's not important to deal with, maybe it was just a silly comment, someone, I don't know, honks the horn at you as you drive past, it's like, okay, it's done. You know, and you don't solve the problems, but you just become more aware of it, and then they have less of it. They attach themselves less and less. So the more you spend in it.
Yeah, and just to take that back to running, because I think there's a lot of benefit to be had here. If there's listeners who are going to get injured in the future, which almost certainly they will, what are you going to think when that happens? Are you going to pay attention to the sense of disappointment, or are you going to say, what do I need to do from here? Right? I need to go to the physio, then I need to do this, then I need to do that. And instead of going to the physio and feeling disappointed, you go to the physio feeling assertive and that, hey, I'm in this situation. How do I make progress? And just feeling that sense of progress and paying attention to the good feelings that come from that, I think is a really good use of that mindfulness strategy, because it will happen. Like, sport's going to give you highs and lows, and as much as you should capitalize on the highs, you don't need to be dragged down by the lows quite so much as
Yeah.
some people do. And I think it's possibly more of a lesson to young people, maybe not, maybe older people
I think
just
it can-
hide it better.
Mm.
I just see just, you know, the tears and stuff after
Yeah.
hard races, just having exposure to school kids and stuff. There's so much
Seems more-
passion
Yeah, and
and
pressure, I imagine, too.
yeah, and there's the pressure which is often just put on themselves. Parents just maybe parents. There are some pushy parents, and there's also just peer pressure and this just a little less savvy about what life's supposed to be.
Hard to be philosophical at those ages.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, you're just kind of in the zone, and yeah, I just see a lot of sadness sometimes after disappointment. So there's definitely benefit to be had, and I hope people can take some insight from that. Running will hurt at the different stages.
Yeah, but it's a mindset thing too of how you deal with the hurt. So I'm probably over enthusiastic and I often get clients coming to me who are already injured or dealing with an injury. So I get super enthusiastic because I know we're going to address that and they're going to be a better runner than
Just
they were
another
before.
opportunity for progress.
Yeah, not just fix the problem, but it's the reason they had the problem was they were doing something that was probably stopping them being as effective as they could have been. So we're going to understand it and then work it through and become a better runner. So they're all initially can be a little bit down, 3, 6 weeks, 8 weeks off.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, but we're going to do stuff in there. And then when you come back, your fitness, we're not going to be too far behind on it. And you're going to be a better athlete or just a healthy person by the end of it. So I think, it's a mindset thing helps. And sometimes it's hard to do that yourself. So whether it's with a group, whether it's with a support page like a Facebook page or a coach, if you're lucky enough to have a coach, someone who can give you that perspective can work wonders.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to end. So you're coaching. Where can people find you if they're if they're interested?
It's at Matt Lewisham performancecoaching.co.nz or mlpc.co.nz.
mlpc.co.nz. Sweet. I'll leave those links. Have you produced any other content, or is it just?
No, I haven't. I tend to work one-on-one with people in groups, and every so often I've worked with people to do seminars or working groups or training sessions. I've had a little bit of a quiet time with the family recently, and so just getting back into it. So I've got my website, and if people are interested in talking about running and where their running's going, reach out. Yeah.
Sweet.
And Facebook page as well. I've got it.
Yeah, right. I'll put some links up there.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks very much. It's been really interesting, and hope the listeners could gain some insights into what things they might want to include or exclude and consider in their training, and I'm sure they'll ask for advice where they need clarification. So
thanks for having me, Gene. It's been really interesting talking and just seeing how broad running can be.
It's running is life, and life is running. There's just all these analogies that make the smaller lesson is also the bigger lesson in disguise.
Yeah.
So thanks very much.
Terrific.